From the Hill, let's bring in Democratic Congressman from California, Adam Schiff. Congressman, always good to see you and have your perspective.
Thanks, Frances.
Well, let's start. You heard Michael Leiter's comments here. So is that in fact the case? Do we have enough resources here to protect us?
Well, I think Michael is right on point. We do have a lot of resources devoted to this, but it's a very hard problem to stop. If someone radicalizes on their own over the internet, they don't reach out to others, there's no foreign contact, finding those people, identifying those people, preventing those people from acts of violence is extraordinarily tough. And I think in some of these cases you have a blurring of the line between terrorism and just random acts of homicide by people who are mentally ill, have drug problems. So that, expands the scope of those that may commit these acts.
Sure, we've had that discussion, the blurred line, the very fine line of mental illness and somebody out there who actually do want to commit acts of terrorism here. And let's talk about the intel. Last month, Canadian intelligence officials, they intercepted chatter of a possible terror plot in Canada. Yet, despite those warnings there, they weren't able to stop. We've seen the value of this kind of intel over and over again. So what went wrong there, and what can we learn from it?
Well, it's hard to say that there was a fault with the intelligence agencies here. It's possible, certainly, that they could have scrutinized at least one of these individuals better than they did. But the reality is that as good as the intelligence gets, it's never going to stop these things completely. And every time you have one of these acts of terrorism, it's not always going to be the case that we should have seen this coming. Frankly, some of these things are just not going to be preventable or predictable. We do, I think, have to continue to try to do a better job. We have to do a lot of outreach in the community so that people on the margins like this, people who are candidates for this kind of extremism and violence, can be identified by their family, by their church, by their mosque, whatever the case may be. There's a role certainly the community can play here, but we have to, I think, be cognizant of the fact that we're not going to be able to stop these acts completely any more than we can stop random acts of murder that have plagued us for quite a long time. Okay,
so in that sense, should there be a difference in our response? You're saying, it's hard to decipher in that sense, but when it comes to lone wolf attacks that may be inspired by ISIS, and then you have on the other side attacks where there is a direct connection, how can you differentiate that, and how can you make a difference in response?
Well, I think we have to look at what are the most significant threats to the country. And the most significant threats, in my point of view, are the larger scale attacks, the things that could really harm great numbers of people or could devastate our economy, like we saw on 9/11. And we've made a lot of progress in degrading that kind of threat, the threat that we used to see and still to some degree see from core al-Qaeda or franchises like AQAP that want to bring down our aircraft. That would be much more terrifying to the country, much more destructive to the country. But those are somewhat more distant threats, frankly, than these homegrown lone wolves. And so we want to try to deal with these twin problems. But I think we also want to be realistic about how much we can do without so invading the privacy of the American people that we undermine what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, you just touched on it, and let's go back to the much larger threat and turning overseas to ISIS. There are new reports that ISIS is using chlorine gas in attacks last month near Baghdad. So if that is the case, and they have low-grade chemical weapons, now, does that change things? Is that a game changer for as far as our strategy and how we confront them?
It's probably not a game changer in terms of our strategy. I hope that it will certainly stiffen the will of the international community to take action, to join us. Nations like Turkey that are still somewhat sitting on the sidelines, I hope it will mobilize. But in terms of whether that means Americans should introduce boots on the ground, and I don't think we should, it doesn't change that. In terms of where we prioritize our airstrikes, how long it will take us to train up the Iraqi forces, the Kurdish forces, probably not in the category at all of game changer. This weapon that ISIS may be using, and in fact we see the regime of Bashar al-Assad dropping barrel bombs with chlorine gas, is just adding to the catalog of horrors that they are committing. But it is not probably as lethal a weapon as ISIS uses just in its conventional weaponry. It's more able to kill people with conventional weapons than with chlorine, yet it is a very terrifying weapon.
All right, wish we had more time, as always, to cover so much more, but we appreciate your perspective and your time, as always, chatting with you, Congressman Adam Schiff. Thank you.